Thank you for tuning in to High Green, the official podcast of the Boston and Maine Railroad Historical Society. High Green is funded by your membership in the society, and any opinions expressed throughout the show are solely those of the owner. As always, if you'd like to learn more about our organization or join us, you can find our website, www.bmrrhs.org.
Perhaps this story hasn't been told in B&M circles, but it's a B&M story and it's a good one.
Oh my God, he says, I don't think I ever saw a train down here before. He was amused.
I still have that wanderlust. I still want to go back railroading.
As we head into the holiday season, be sure to check out our online store for all kinds of great Boston and Maine themed gifts. You can find things like our 16-ounce glasses emblazoned with the Minuteman logo, our discs including all editions of our magazine, the B&M Bulletin, up to 2020. We also have winter jackets, sweatshirts, hoodies, winter hats, baseball hats, t-shirts, and all kinds of great books and reading material, including our latest publication, Steam Trains of Yesteryear, the Monadnock Steam Town in Northern Story, which chronicles one of the earliest tourist railroad operations on Boston and Maine trackage. You can head right on over to our online store to find all of these and many more things for the Boston and Maine fan in your life. Or maybe even a little holiday gift for yourself. And from all of us here at the Boston and Maine Railroad Historical Society, we'd like to wish you a happy, safe, and healthy holiday season. Thank you so much for your support. You've seen these things from a motor car enthusiast perspective, but you've also seen a great deal of B&M history and some of these lines from the engineer's seat and from working for the railroad. And, you got your railroad start working for short lines. And, the White Mountain branch is a great example of that with New England Southern. You ended up working for Pete Dearness's New England Southern Railroad, operating on the White Mountain branch, the former White Mountain branch of the Boston and Maine. So that's kind of a perspective that you've been able to have as a hobbyist, an enthusiast, and a railroader. And how did you get involved with actual, nuts and bolts railroading?
So it's a multi-part question, a multi-part answer. So I was in high school at the time, and I was in computer class, and I probably should have been paying attention more. But I was scrolling around the internet, and I saw that Seashore Trolley Museum had a junior motorman program.
Yep.
And basically what that was, young people interested in running trolleys, but don't meet the insurance requirement of being 18 to run in passenger service, could come up, volunteer. They'd get the same training,
yep.
But just because of your age, you couldn't do that with passengers. But you would do yard moves, you would help out, you'd be a gopher. Mm-hmm. So I was doing that. Also, when I was in high school, I got my neighbor's mail, who lives actually 3 doors down from here, Gordon Wallach. And Gordy's a hell of a guy. He's like a second father to me. He really is. And, I kept getting his mail and kept going down, hitting his mail. And I noticed he had the train on his mailbox there, and talking about trains. And he's like, "Oh yeah, you're the kid with that rail car down the street." So he had said one day, "Do you want to come for a cab ride?" And I said, "No, please, no."
Yeah.
So back in, it was like 2001, I was still in high school. And that picture right there with the 566 was from my first cab ride on the New England Southern.
Yeah.
That's when I first met Peter.
Yeah.
And, again, I was under 18. I was just kind of going for a cab ride. And I was actually lucky enough to go down to the other railroad that Gordy worked for part-time, the Quincy Bay Terminal.
Yeah.
That's an interesting little operation down there. But I went for the cab ride down to Manchester. And we did 25 miles an hour.
Yeah.
In Pete's blue engine, the 566. And I was just enamored by that. I mean, that was great. I loved it. A lot different than the trolleys.
Yeah.
So, I continued to plunk along at the trolley museum. And as caboose trains came up, Gordy would say, if he happened to be the engineer, hey, do you want to come for a ride along and, kind of just help out, like, like throw a switch or stand here with a flag or just enjoy the experience. Because when they did the switching up at Caboose Village, just having a quasi-trained, experienced person to throw a switch. And I got that experience on seashores. This is how you throw a switch. This is how you flag a crossing type thing. So as time went on, I kept saying, I'd like to be an engineer. I'd like to be an engineer. And, I was hanging around with, when the caboose trains would happen.
Yep.
And finally, Gordy had said to me, he's like, listen, down at Four River, we're hiring a full-time engineer. And there's a lot of training that's involved. Because we're hiring this guy and we have to train him from scratch. The guy had no railroad work experience prior. He's off the street guy. We're going to put him through the entire course. He's like, I talked to Peter. He is willing to let you do the ride time and the throttle time at New England Southern, but you have to do the classroom stuff elsewhere. And so happens, if you're willing to put in the time and drive to Quincy every day to do this on your own time and your own money, I will put you through the program. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And I drove to Quincy every day through the Boston traffic. And this was back in 07, 08 when gas was, almost what it is today, but it was expensive. And I was working at the time for an ambulance company. So I had 5 days a week off. I'd work 2 days, but they were 24-hour shifts. So I had 5 days a week off to actually go do this. So I went through the program, and then I had to do the throttle time, observed time with an actual engineer. I was issued a student card. I went through all the training. It was all done. NORAC signed off, engineer stuff signed off, driving records, everything in place. And I would go from my house here in Danvers all the way up to Concord to go down and switch for an hour Blue Seal. Just to accumulate the hours. And it seemed like at the time it took forever, and it probably did. I have that log somewhere still, all the observed hours that I had to get signed off on. And I finally remember I went for my check ride down to Manchester in the 2370 by then. And that, when I got back, they signed my card. That was like one of the greatest days. And I remember I was so happy. I worked for Peter part-time. I also, because, I was young with a gun and a new engineer's license. I was like, I'm going to expand my roles here, and went down to Mass Coastal and worked down there on the passenger and the freight trains. And that was actually my first taste of bigger railroading than New England Southern.
For sure.
But, like I said, I put in the time and the money and the effort initially, and it's been rewarded that I get to work for New England Southern. And I remember, a lot of times just, Pete call you last minute. Because Pete would normally run or someone else would run. I was kind of like the third tier, but, Pete would have a meeting or a customer, or he just couldn't get tied up in train service, and I would get the phone call. And I remember that was such a privilege to do, and go down to Manchester. And we were hauling some big trains back then, and they were heavy with all the cement traffic. That was some heavy traffic coming up through Amoskeag. I mean, I'd be, in the eighth notch, Sanders on, probably lighting fires all the way through Amoskeag, blowing the carbon out of that engine. But that thing could pull. That was a great engine. It was just a great experience. And, one of the things that, relates to the Boston, Maine is you'd see a lot of the signs of the B&M. The semaphore masts are still out there. Pulling the caboose trains up at Northfield Yard with the freight house there. Some of that being some B&M vintage equipment. Some of those private buggies. That was just a great time. I mean, The caboose trains were always fun, except for one, like the Donner Party. One New Year's Eve caboose train that probably should have, sane people would have canceled, but we didn't.
Right.
But yeah, that was a great time. And, obviously after the lease was lost and we basically had evacuation day out of Concord, it slowed down a little to what we have is 3M. And, I got to applaud people like Peter. Number one, Peter is an absolute gentleman. Just a hell of a nice guy. And I mean, we bust his stones a little bit about the eternal rose-colored glasses that he has. But I'll tell you, if it was not for Peter, number one, I wouldn't have my start in railroading. Yeah. Okay, I'd be sitting on the sidelines wanting to look in. I thank Peter, and I'm thankful for the chance that he gave me my start. Yeah. He took the risk of saying, well, I don't know who this kid really is, and but taking the risk on me, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah.
In that, also I'm thankful for Peter and Ed Clark, because if it was not for them, the White Mountain division would look like the Northern does today.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
It'd be gone.
Yeah. If he hadn't come along in 82 and said, I'm going to take the state-owned line and operate it with more, motivation and dedication than the previous, leases, it wouldn't be there. It wouldn't be there. And if he hadn't started the original Winnipesaukee Railroad, because New England Southern, of course, started the original Winnipesaukee Railroad, the Clarks, who knows if the Clarks would have started the Hobo Railroad. And if they hadn't, then it would be gone.
Yeah. And, everybody out there taking pictures today of what we do at New England Southern should thank Peter for having the tenacious, sometimes we call it foolhardy, but the tenacious spirit that he has and the dedication that he had that, we obviously was big traffic down to Manchester, but to continue after that on the White Mountain, to keep trying to find sources of traffic, which, he was at the retirement age. He could have said that, throw my hands up, I'm done.
Yeah.
And he's still out there. He's still, comes and shows up and, still has an involvement to some degree in the new operation.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. In like I said, if it was not for Peter and later Ed Clark, we wouldn't have a White Mountain branch to speak of.
Nope.
The state owned it. 2 operators gave her the old swing and a miss, at the time. And obviously the economies are different back then. But if it was not for people like Peter, it wouldn't exist. It wouldn't be there.
It's here somewhere. Yeah.
Well, it's funny as you say, talk about synchronicities, that was like me and like Bruce Davidson, weird parallels in time that, we both worked on the short lines, both were involved with the Wolfboro and New England Southern.
Yeah.
Just weird. Same with Brian. On the Wolfboro, on the White Mountain branch. Maybe that's the ladder you got to climb. I don't know.
Well, that's the great thing about New England is that, it's such a small world, and the railroad world is even smaller than that, infinitely. And that certainly has its advantages when you think about, getting to know people and the stories, and then forming connections that you can, use to build friendships and preserve history. It's such a great community. And I think that's something that we're all super thankful for. I know, Andrew, you had a question kind of geared towards the White Mountain branch and New England Southern and into the future. Jesse's worked for New England Southern for a while and seen a lot of changes on New England Southern, and certainly New England Southern is something that's changing even now. Last time, I think this was probably after you got booted off last time because of tech issues, but we talked a little bit about the White Mountain branch, not necessarily with the VTR takeover, but more so, how can New England Southern and the state kind of recognize that the White Mountain branch has a potential for sure in the future to be, a viable freight option, given that it goes up to the White Mountains, goes to the Lakes region, it's, parallel to 93,
So that's kind of the direction we took that question last time, more broad towards its potential. And I don't know if you had, questions about that or thoughts about that or anything of that.
To your point, Rick, like it seems like the White Mountains branch has been the line that has sort of risen from the ashes, almost, so to speak, like the Phoenix, the late 70s. I think a lot of people were like, well, that's it. It's going to just be another death in the woods, like the main line to Woodsville once was. But just to see it resurrected and, utilized for the purposes it is today. And, even more recently, it's had a few, I guess I'll say a few run-ins with potential rail trail groups, et cetera, looking to utilize various parts of it for trails, et cetera. So it's kind of had to be a pretty resilient little line. Sounds like Peter Dearness really takes so much of the credit for keeping this line just up and running.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, without giving out the 11 herbs and spices of Vermont Rail's plans, I think the future's bright up there. I think we are learning from our 150 or so years of history, the mistakes that have been made, in the past. And, but I've also said before, New Hampshire, and mostly New England, but especially in the micro sense, New Hampshire on the I-93 corridor, they really need to decide politically, like which way are they going to go? Is it going to be a business-friendly state, or is it going to continue to push out small business that in industry? A lot of groups want rail. Oh, we got to bring trains back. No, you need to bring industry back.
Yeah.
Railroads do not operate in a vacuum of space. We are very happy to serve an industry. We just need the industry to come back. And whether that's done at the ballot box, by local zoning, by the, industrial development, we, in the railroad world, we are constantly fighting subsidized competition.
Yeah.
It's always a constant battle. Trucks, for the simple fact, do not pay their fair share.
Right.
Other than the trucks pay a fuel tax. And if it happens to be a toll road, they pay a toll. But that is so inconsequential compared to the cost that a railroad has to pay for 100% of its own maintenance, its own snow clearing and upkeep, its own maintenance of equipment.
Yeah.
A lot of times trailers are a pool trailer, and the individual trucking company isn't paying for the maintenance of that.
Right.
We have to, in the railroad industry, fight that. And it's not just New Hampshire. This is around the world. Trains have some disadvantages. Some of it's self-imposed.
Yeah.
Some of it is the nature of the beast. But we are looking at, in this country, rising fuel costs. We are making the push to be more cognizant of our environment. And I think, at least to me, rail is the most sensible option. We've come to be somewhat of an instant gratification society. Point and click on Amazon, it's here tomorrow. And you wonder, ultimately, what is the long cost of that?
Yeah.
You look at traffic on 93. There's definitely the playing on the strengths of what the railroad can offer. Transloading is one of those amazing strengths. Is you don't need to have property abutting a railroad,
right.
Be it ours or anyone else's.
Yeah.
That's a great strength of a transload operation, is you can use the speed and frequency of a truck to serve your factory or your industry, but you don't need to be touching the tracks.
Yeah.
Because I understand something, it's impractical,
right,
to do that everywhere. That's a great use of a railroad, be it ours or someone else's. If you look at Mass Central along the line, I mean, they have numerous transload operations over there. And that's a fantastic use of the railroad. you fill up the rail car, you empty the rail car at the industry's leisure, and you bring a string of cars out. And a class one is more than happy to take a long string of cars from A to B.
Yeah.
They don't want to deal with the switching. And that's a perfect use of a short line.
Yeah. I think one thing that, New Hampshire really never grasped in the wake of the B&M Railroad in its bankruptcy was, the B&M wants to get rid of these rural branch lines because, it's not profitable to run, 20 miles to Epping with a single car of feed, but how do we take these railroad lines that still connect major population centers and make them viable, for transload freight?
We can be the hubs in the connecting between the spokes.
Right.
Right. Manchester had an intermodal yard. When you think of what we've thrown away,
right.
We had an intermodal yard in Manchester, New Hampshire, the largest populated city in the state.
Yep.
All right. You have an intermodal yard right in the middle of it. Imagine what could be done if you were spotting trailers there today and not tying up traffic on 93.
They do it in air and they truck them up, but there you go. They're tying up the traffic on 93.
Yeah, and the solution is to build another lane on the highway that's already full
with trucks. Yeah. And, that's the thing is that, the railroad, the railroad's purpose in serving these small, customers directly, it hasn't died completely, but it certainly is diminished, when you think about mom and pop grain stores and all this stuff. But the railroad still has a role to play in connecting these large communities and like you said, being the hub. The railroad will bring the raw materials to Concord or Canterbury, and then you put it on a truck there and you bring it to places like Belmont and Bristol and way out in the western part of the state. And you have that in some places, North Walpole, New Hampshire, you have propane transload. All the towns around, North Walpole, all those small little communities like Unity and Sullivan, they get their stuff out of North Walpole, New Hampshire. Well, wouldn't it have made more sense to have your transload in Keene, New Hampshire?
Yep.
Have your propane transload in downtown Keene. You take the propane to Winchester and Swansea and have that railroad get you to a certain point. And then when it's not feasible to run trains further than that, you use your trucks.
It's just like I say, we obviously had an oversaturation of branch lines in New England in general.
Oh, yeah.
We think of all the customers along that line, the mills. There's so much potential now. What we can sell you is service.
Yep.
We cannot sell you a direct class one connection over our line exclusively to Omaha, Nebraska. We can't. It doesn't exist. What we can sell you is that the manager of a plant knows the conductor's name, knows him by face.
Yeah.
They're on a first name basis, and when he needs a car spotted in a certain area because they're doing something, he can just ask and it'll get done. He can call a local manager. He can call us. He can, they could call Peter and say, listen, we got this issue. Organic business development with like the military train. That was because, someone in the guard talked to Peter.
Yeah, right.
That wasn't that the Pentagon thought of this. This was organic business development by Peter when he was running the operation.
Yeah.
And, you're not going to get that with CSX or Union Pacific or BNSF or any alphabet soup
Right.
railroad. You're going to get that with a local short line.
Yeah.
And the fact that, we're keeping the heritage of the Boston and Maine alive is fantastic. And that we're using the track for what it was intended for.
Yeah.
And that, we're, without giving out the 11 herbs and spices of what's going on, I think the future is bright.
Yeah.
And we all know that the dynamic of New England railroading in general is going to change in a way we can't still fathom.
No.
Nobody knows.
Right.
Some of the stuff I hear, working for the railroad, and people like want to confirm this thing they heard online about you. And it's like, that's not even close to reality. It's not going to happen.
No, but I think from the observations that you've made working for New England Southern and the role that it has to play as a strategic, piece of the former B&M that's still there for a reason and still has a viable purpose. And, it certainly can be important in the modern day, not just from a historical sense, but for an actual utilitarian sense. I think that's something that hopefully will aid its future and keep it alive. It's an interesting thing to look at the Boston and Maine and look at what the Boston and Maine was, what the Boston and Maine is, and what the Boston and Maine is going to be into the future. And I think kind of looking at all this as people that have always been looking backwards at the B&M, we can tell how New England has been affected by the B&M, how it was affected, how it's being affected now. But I think, as post B&M individuals, all three of us, for the most part, I think we have to look at the ways in which, the B&M has influenced ourselves in our own lives. And certainly for you, having, grown up, becoming a part of railroading through your exposure to the former B&M directly, and then, becoming involved with its history directly. Certainly you've had a lot of influence in your life from the Boston and Maine and from its remnants. And what are some of the things that it's given you and some of the things that it's brought to your life in those ways?
Well, it's never far from me. Number one, I own a second rail car that was delivered in 1957 to the Boston and Maine.
Yeah. It's
sitting out in my backyard. I have switch stands. The B&M physically is never far from me. My house looks like a railroad museum, especially in the backyard, but where the track cars are stored. But I've never lost the wonder that the B&M created through those pictures and those books. A lot of times I'll be going down the track and I just, wonder what it would have been like to be in a Pacific locomotive or a consolidation, trundling down this line at 60 miles an hour. Yeah. And that spirit, I think, is still there. You can see the semaphores that, you look at an old photograph and you look at now and you're like, wow, this was that spot. This is where this happened.
Yeah.
And as far as that's my personal thing, but the B&M has done for me in my outside life is, camaraderie.
Yeah.
A lot of great people are in this hobby, be it the historical society, be it Cotton Valley, be it the railroad connections.
Mm-hmm.
I take a little bit of pride in this. When we run in New England Southern, maybe it's because we only run so infrequently. I don't know. But every time we run, especially if it's something special, it's like the circus came to town,
Right.
You talk to the people, you see people you haven't seen in a while. Especially in the caboose trains, that was a great thing to do.
Yeah.
And if the B&M didn't exist, then I wouldn't be sitting here today and we wouldn't have this interview.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately to go forward is, people like you, like James, like Andrew, that are bringing the Boston and Maine to the modern day. So there's a little bit of a confession. I've been a member about a year of the Historical Society. I was aware it existed. I knew of it, and I knew they put out a magazine once in a while.
Yeah.
And I always remember that the cover was never related to anything in the book.
That's so true.
It's about some dam project or something like that.
Yeah.
And I always remember, as a little bit of a joke. I always remember, I never had much connection to it, and because it was the meetings were held in Lowell.
Yeah.
I have no ever reason to go to Lowell,
right.
Ever.
Yeah.
I rode the trolleys there once, got the T-shirt, moved on.
Yeah.
I saw the 410 once. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Took a picture of it in the snow and it's somewhere in my archive. I don't go to Lowell.
Yeah.
I never had much of a connection. And then COVID came and I saw the work with the Minuteman Tales.
Yep.
Going, wow, this is a really interesting little vignette of a piece of history presented in a very professional manner and very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one in Plymouth, right?
Yeah.
President Pierce was there. I've been on the same rails with my motor car that the president has been on.
Oh yeah.
And that's Livermore Falls. What was there, in the bringing of that knowledge forth. And that's one reason and I tell you this all the time, it's so much respect is I can show you a picture of some random spot and The guy that was probably in the picture, the locomotive where that line ran, and you're able to tell me that, and you weren't alive.
Right. Yeah.
You had to learn that at some point.
Yeah, too much time on our hands. But it's true.
But,
true.
that's not crystallized knowledge in your brain. That's fresh. You had to learn that at some point. And that's what the work that you guys have done, and that's what got me to join the Historical Society, is that I now have a connection because I could see where my $55, whatever it is going to, is, wow, these guys are putting out this great content, this podcast. I mean, hearing an interview from someone that was working in 1917 or Major Greeno, like we was working around this area on steam locomotives. If you guys hadn't done this all would be lost.
Yeah. And that's, I've only been part of the society now for three years maybe. And like you said, I mean, it's something I was always aware of. I mean, you see them at the shows with the tables and their hats and their shirts, and you see some familiar faces, but to join the society and get involved with it and to work through the archives and to do the newsletter and to work with James on Minuteman Tales and Andrew on the podcast and to do these things and take the B&M that we know and love and find a way to make it fresh and accessible for people. That's the goal with this, is how do you take this thing that we know and love, and that people because the guys that saw it, they love it because they knew it.
Mm-hmm.
They love it because they saw it. But how are you going to make some 5-year-old kid born in 2015 in 10 years care about Livermore Falls,
right,
or anything like this? How are you going to, we're only getting further removed from the B&M. Someday the B&M is going to be to people in the future what the East Branch and Lincoln was.
Yeah.
And it's just been so rewarding to learn more about the railroad and learn more about the people, and to dig out these tapes from 40 years ago that were recorded with guys that were working in 1917 and say, there's somebody out there that's going to be interested in this.
Yeah,
and that we have to get it out there. And that's the goal. And that's what we've been doing. And that's honestly the most fun, is just how can we deliver this in a way that people are going to enjoy?
And we are on the cusp of so much institutional knowledge disappearing within the next couple of 3 years. As a side note, like there's a society down in Connecticut that deals with antique tractors and machinery. But I mean, there was a guy down there. He's in his I think he's probably passed away by now, but he was in his late 90s when I was there. And this gentleman was able to, even at 95, swing around a bucket loader, a steam shovel, it's not a diesel power, but a steam shovel, effortlessly with clutches and just brakes, like it was an extension of his arm.
Yeah.
And they had the forethought to sit him down and put a camera in front of him and say, talk.
Yep.
I'm not going to ask you any questions. Tell me everything you know.
Yeah.
And, this is great that this knowledge, is being spread. Oral histories like this. I mean, minute details aren't important. I mean, the incantation of the word and spelling is so much more important.
Yeah.
And we're able to pass this on to somebody else someday, that someday in the future, someone's going to be really bored for 2 hours listening to this podcast. But it's here. The story's here. The story's out. I would never even know that existed.
Yeah.
I
didn't either.
Even if I was a member of the society, had you guys not taken the time and the effort to put that forward, I wouldn't know it existed. Right. Looking through the archives online of the stuff you can actually see on the website, there's some fascinating things on there that I wouldn't even think of.
Yeah.
Valuation maps of long gone branch lines that just.
There's a siding you didn't know existed.
Yeah, there it is.
That's when it was torn out. That's what customer it served.
The work that you guys are doing is important, not only for the B&M, but also for the ages. I mean, that is what it is.
Yeah.
This piece of fabric of our railroad history and our fabric was very interwoven into life in New England, especially when the railroads was a big employer, which not so much now, but when everybody worked for the B&M or had a relative that did, that slice of history our very important history
Yep.
is being preserved and passed on, where otherwise, if it was not for this work, it would be gone.
Yeah, and it's it's the only way we're going to experience it. Looking at those slides of the Portsmouth branch, I'm never going to see a train in Epping.
Nope.
But if I look at these slides, there it is. And I know, Andrew, for you, your big thing is going out and actually going to these places physically and getting that connection. And through your pieces in the newsletter, you've kind of done the same thing where, say, hey, I do this. Why don't you go out and walk this right away and look at this piece of history that I've located and found. And, 50 years from now, people are going to look at those articles and go, oh, hey, he went here. I'm going to go see if it's still there. It's just going to push it forward for new generations that are going to really be hard pressed to have resources in the future. Because if you think about it, we're at a transition point right now. 20 years ago, you had guys that were alive that worked on steam engines. Nowadays, the B&M's been gone for almost 40 years. We're at a point now where people that actually worked for the Boston and Maine Railroad are becoming, unfortunately, few and far between. So right now we're at a transition point again, and constantly you have these transition points. But if you're able to go out and put the work in, it's going to have an effect someday. They're going to be enjoying what we're doing now just as much as people enjoyed, interviews with guys that worked for the B&M in the steam era.
You sit there and go, my God, they run so few trains today because there's these separations and PTC and there's not enough capacity. You look at with a quarter of the technology that we have available today.
Oh, yeah.
They were running extras, work extras, track gangs, local freights, express freights, hot freight, local passenger, name trains, all in the same line.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said, a quarter of the technology we have available today.
Right, exactly.
We can tell today where a locomotive is down to the foot.
Oh, yeah.
When I was on Mass Coastal, there was a group actually from Harvard there, and also MIT and a few other colleges that were initially working on the PTC. Like, was GPS more reliable, or AEI tag screwed to the ties more reliable? This is like way back when, but they were trying to eliminate the two. And we were actually using Hyannis Yard with two locomotives.
Yep.
Just on isolated track. We'd taken the track out of service, just running back and forth to test those two things. And the work they were doing was actually pretty fascinating with those computers. But we have this available and we're not using it.
Yeah.
We have to have these, hour separation between trains.
Right.
Between passenger. Why?
Yeah, we lost a lot of the jobs, a lot of the skills. And, it's interesting that, we just need to be sure that we don't lose the same amount of history.
Oh, no.
If we lose the same amount of history as the railroads that we've lost, we're in big, big, big trouble. And I think the fact that all three of us have an invested interest, and there's so many like us, and there's young people now that, are getting interested in trains. I think that, you got to get involved somehow. And it's so rewarding if you do. And hopefully you'll be able to pick up the same things that we all have,
And, I always say, I don't think railroading kept me out of trouble. I was always kind of on the straight and narrow anyway. But my God, you got someone that's young and enthusiastic and wants to get into the railroad business, or maybe consider it as a career. And, there's that book, The Proximity Principle, that people talk about. But it's really the whole idea is, if you want to be in a business, if you want to be a cook, don't work at Walmart.
Right.
If you want to be a chef, talk to chefs.
Yeah.
If, I want to be in the railroad business, I talk to people in the railroad business. And, some people say I'm lucky to get the deal that I did and everything with my engineer's license and, with Peter, but, there's no such thing as luck. Luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity.
Yep.
And I had the opportunity to do that, and I took advantage of that opportunity and I prepared for it.
Yeah.
Through doing the simple things at Seashore as a junior motorman, throwing switches, greasing loops, counting up the Northern Southern just as a volunteer, helping out, throwing switches, being around, FaceTime. I don't think railroading is like a glamorous career like that, young men want to do. They see that roaring steam locomotive going by.
Oh, that's gone.
When the jet age came, we were second rate. I mean, look at Lionel Trains, right?
Right.
But it's a good job. You have to, as a rail fan, you have to realize the difference between an obligation and a passion.
Yeah.
Winter railroading is not the postcard it seems to be. And, as a rail fan, you can stay home and just, stay in your house. And
Right.
the railroad, you got to go out and deal with that stuff.
Yeah.
And, it's also a job that's not for everybody. I mean, some people want to go work for the railroad. They want to be the engineer. They want to do this. They want to do that. As I said, hang around these people.
Yeah.
Say, hey, I mean, it's tough with cab rides and stuff nowadays, but, get a sense of the job before you commit to signing up for a conductor's class at whatever class 1, because you think it's for you.
Yeah.
You are away from home a lot. I mean, I only do this, the sun's only really a part-time job for me. I have a day job, but even then, part-time, sometimes it gets to be tough to balance full-time job, family. That is, and if you're working for the railroad and that's your sole thing, you are at the beck and call of the company.
Right.
And it's going to take a while before you build seniority, depending on when you got in. And that job is not for everybody, especially in the transportation side. I mean, maintenance away management are a little bit different. You're a little bit closer to home and home every night. But, they say you live together as a crew, you die together as a crew.
Right.
I mean, I rely on the conductor to do the right thing.
Yep.
We spend a lot of time with each other. But this is the right job for us.
Yeah.
If you're a young person, you want to get into professional railroading, think long and hard before you sign on the dotted. I was like joining the Army. Think long and hard before you want to do it, because it's a great, rewarding profession. You'll meet a lot of great people, but it's very demanding.
Oh yeah.
If you're a young guy and you're or a woman and you're single, you don't have any family obligations, this might be the time to jump in. Whereas if you're later in life, you have a wife, kids, probably not the best time to jump both feet into the pond. And that's not just any particular railroad. That's every single railroad.
For sure.
I agree with everything you guys were saying about how important it is that we now are trying to, archive and catalog as much as the information that we can, because, as Rick, I think you said, we're only getting further and further away from the Boston, Maine, and I mean, as each generation passes, it's going to become more and more sort of mythology versus actual fact. And to have these actual facts and, articles and podcasts and everything recorded for the future generations to go back and reference, I mean, that's going to be invaluable to like some young kid today who 20 years from now is going to become a real B&M fan. They're going to need these resources to help their own knowledge base.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, actually. I was just looking at this book that was written in the 1860s, where this photographer went around and took pictures of surviving American Revolution veterans and interviewed them and took their picture. And there was only like 4 or 5 guys left, but he went around, and one of them was actually from Maine. And to see the pictures of these guys that had fought in the Revolution and hear their stories, and this is right during the Civil War, right? Was pretty incredible. And that's something I think that people have recognized for a long time, is that when you're in the midst of history, if you're interested in history, don't just look backwards. You make history in the moment too, because what we're looking at now may be boring and mundane to us, but in 50 to 70 years, it's going to be priceless to other people, and that's something that we forget. Yeah,
and I always say it's nice to have a hobby and be able to interact with other people. And I think that's one thing that the society could offer, if someone is interested in, helping out with the archives, helping out with just standing at a table at a show.
Yeah,
that's an important thing to do. And it's a good group of people. Same with Cotton Valley. Same with anyone in the I found in the general railroading sense. If someone pretends that they're not in the trains and they work for a railroad, you're lying. You're either a rail fan or you're a liar. If you work for a railroad, you have to like this job and like trains. And to the same degree, but you have to have some kind of interest, because there's other things you can go make money at in the world. But I'm very happy that, at least in this sense, this information is being preserved. And my story now it belongs to the society, and maybe someone else could relate to that further on. And just hearing people that have long passed, hearing the stories of them going to work every day, which, like I said, it sounds boring and mundane. Listen to Major Greeno talk about how, he was hustling locomotives, which is a very boring thing. And, setting handbrakes. And here we are years and years and years later, listening to it.
This is so great.
This is great.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I hope that this continues, not only with the society, but, with all these old timers that we have. There's so much knowledge that they have. I always said, my other job, I deal with elders in an official capacity. And I always said, if I was governor, I would not approve any money for a school to be built unless there's a senior center inside. We throw away so much knowledge with our seniors. And, we need, in every hobby, especially the B&M, to put a camera in front of these people before they're gone. And it's not an option anymore. And just stick a camera or a microphone in front and say, just talk. Tell me your stories. And that's what you guys are doing. And I think that's a great thing.
We certainly appreciate you for a second time allowing us to listen to your story and to contribute to it, and to pick your brain a little bit about everything that the B&M and railroading has done for you and that you've done for it. So on behalf of all of us, we really thank you for coming out and letting us do this. And we hope everybody's going to enjoy it just as much as we did.
Well, thank you, Rick, for having me. And, I hope that this program continues on and we can record a lot of great information for the future.
That wraps up this week's episode of High Green. If you'd like to be on the show, or know somebody who might have some interesting stories about the Boston and Maine Railroad or its legacy, please reach out to us. You can email us at bmrrhs@gmail.com or send us a message right on Facebook. Thanks so much for listening, and we hope to have you back next time for some more great stories about the Boston and Maine Railroad and its legacy right here in New England.